Good evening. I have got a suggestion, a proposal for the Washington policymakers to help them win the war against the menace, which is Russia. Russia has been bombing the whole of the Ukraine. There is barely any electricity and running water in most of Ukraine's major cities. And Putin's illegal war has gone ahead in annexing 4 of Ukraine's regions, the Donbas region and others that are next to Russia. So it is important for Washington to understand that Putin has to be stopped, because if it goes beyond Ukraine, who knows what he will do to the rest of Europe. And if he goes to the rest of Europe, what will stop him from accessing, even entering the United States itself? Therefore, the free world, not just Washington, the free world, together with the British Commonwealth and the rest of the free world, of which Zimbabwe, as I'm going to propose, should be part of it, has therefore to be concerned with this threat to global peace and global prosperity and the global order of authority. This peace is threatened by Putin and his illegal war. Therefore, Washington and all the Washington policymakers have to recognize that as they are taking this war into multiple areas of concern. The war is waging on in Ukraine, but there's also another Russian invasion that is going on unabated, which is the Russia's takeover of Africa. In the Sahel region, France has been backing off, and Russia is backing up its own military groups that are taking over from Central Africa to to Niger, to Burkina Faso, and the whole Sahel region. And as I'm saying that, and also in northern Mozambique, which is close by to my home, which is next to Zimbabwe. Therefore, I am concerned about that. We are having sleepless nights because of that. Zimbabwe being a country that just found oil, we are at a precarious position, an unsafe position, whereby any provocation can cause mayhem in that country. Therefore, for the protection of Zimbabwe, it needs for Zimbabwe to think strategically. The generals in the army of Zimbabwe, General Chiwenga, who is now doubling as a general and also a politician, the deputy president of Zimbabwe, Mr. General Chiwenga, also Emerson Mnangagwa, His Excellency, and also the chief general in the army need to be cognizant of the Russian threat that may come to Zimbabwe. Therefore, it is necessary for the Zimbabwe military and the Zimbabwean government to pivot towards the West, whilst there is still time. If they do not do so, the next government should do so. And if the next government is not willing to do so, I myself am willing to lead the next government that will pivot to the West, so that we can save Zimbabwe and fight this war against the menace, which is Russia. Therefore, this new government that I propose, on the condition that this current government does not pivot to the West in order to protect Zimbabwe, or the so-called next government, which ostensibly is going to be led by Chamisa, if it is not serious about joining the free world, I myself am sacrificing myself to take the leadership mentally to make sure that our nation is protected, and also therefore close the gap in the whole of Africa. I propose that the Washington policymakers need a partner in Africa. At the moment, Anthony Blinken had somewhat not so successful a trip when he came to South Africa, DRC, and Rwanda. I think that he faced some opposition with South Africa's Naledi Pondo and some African nations are standing in the middle when you talk about the United Nations resolutions against Russia. African nations, most of them are pro-Russian or they are in the middle. African nations, it's not time for us to stand in the middle. We cannot stand in the middle, South Africa. We cannot stand in the middle, rest of Africa, because standing in the middle is as good as standing for nothing. In fact, standing in the middle is standing for Putin. And if you're standing for Putin, you're standing for oligarchy. You are standing for a system, an anti-capitalist system that favors a few oligarchs and that ravages nations, brings about wars, and takes off the resources of the people. And if African leaders want to be part of that, it's going to be a disgrace to the African communities. But as a pro-Africanist, someone who cares about the lives of ordinary Africans, it is important to implore you African leaders, therefore, to take a strong stand against Putin and stand together with Washington. Therefore, coming back to the people in Washington, saying that Washington needs a strong partner in Africa. It would have found it in Nigeria or South Africa, but Nigeria is too preoccupied with the oil wars. It's got its own internal wars that it is fighting. Therefore, it's not ready to take that mantle of leadership in Africa. South Africa is ideologically confused. It is stuck between a rock and a hard place. The ANC is rocked by so much corruption, unable to govern even itself, such that it is willing to take Russian money and put its own people under the bus, and does not seem to understand the mindset of Washington. To understand, I therefore believe that the scholars of Zimbabwe, me included, understand the Washington consensus, understand the Washington mindset. However, those that are in government in Zimbabwe right now do not understand, and therefore are going to be part of the African leaders that were going to bring about a disruption or a mayhem in the global peace, because I do believe it's because they are ill-advised. Not that they are evil, it's just that they are ill-advised, including Naledi Pondo and the South African government. They are just ill-advised and do not see properly. We need to put them in the light, put things in the right perspective, so that they know that it is important for African countries to pivot to the West. So now, if I say that Washington needs a strong country, a strong partner in Africa, and I propose that Zimbabwe is going to be that partner. But Zimbabwe at the moment is crushed under the ZANU-PF government that does not understand or does not conceive the gravity of the matter, or even has got a clue of what is going on, except that they also are intoxicated with their looting apparatus, such that they do not see anything beyond looting. Now there is oil in Zimbabwe. They don't understand or conceive that if Russian operatives enter into Zimbabwe, there will be war that the Zimbabwe military will not be able to win. And because the Zimbabwean military does not have any good relations with countries that can support it. You see, China does not get itself involved in wars. China will not come to rescue Zimbabwe militarily. And China has always said that it does not enter into the military squabbles of countries. China is merely an economic country. It just comes in for economic interests, trade relations, and not military interests. We need a country as strong as the United States of America, whose military is willing to undertake military operations, whose agencies like the CIA and the FBI are willing to fight a real war and wage a war against the menace who is Putin, who is now starting to ravage Africa. As I say that, he is busy in the Sahel region and in northern Mozambique. Nothing will stop him from coming into Zimbabwe and getting into the strategic DRC as we get into the fourth industrial revolution and the need for electric batteries and the need for lithium producing countries like Zimbabwe and DRC. You see, Zimbabwe and DRC, you put them into the picture, they become strategic nations of the world, and Vladimir Putin and Russia will not salivate and will not blink twice before they come and terrorize both Zimbabwe and DRC for Putin's war and the oligarchies on intentions. Therefore, it is necessary for Washington to recognize that you need a strong Zimbabwe that is going to help you to also to make a strong DRC. So what I am proposing right now is an emergence of a strong Zimbabwe that is backed up by Washington institutions. I'm talking about a new Zimbabwean initiative, okay, which I'm going to call the Zimbabwean Industrial and Infrastructural Development Program. According to my estimates, will cost somewhere in the region of 80 billion United States dollars. And my proposal is that the Washington policymakers and its agencies to help us, therefore, as Zimbabwe, with 80 billion United States dollars in order to kick start this new Zimbabwe, which is going to be strong, politically stable, with strong institutions, a growing economy, so that Washington will have a strong and reliable all-weather partner in Africa that will be able to pin down the insurgency in northern Mozambique and be able to politically align the DRC together with the Western world and bring peace in that region, so that when the extractive industries are at work, there is peace and stability and respect of the rule of law, and also getting the people of Zimbabwe and the DRC of Congo out of poverty, thereby creating this Southern Africa that is strong, that is economically viable, which is going to be a middle to upper middle income population, which is also going to be a source of market for Western European companies that are part of this free world. So you get to see the importance of that. Therefore, from our side as the citizens in this region, we will need that kind of partnership. So it's time for Africa to recognize that it has to choose its partners wisely, whether we are going to make the West our partners, or you are going to go with Putin, who is not interested in developing any countries. Okay, China, on the other hand, is only an economic partner, and they have already made that possible. I mean, they've already spoken about that time and time again. Therefore, you cannot rely on China in terms of war, but you can rely on China for financial services, technological services, but for the full throttle, for a full-on robust relationship, it is important for African countries to understand that there is no any other way except Washington. There is no any other way except tearing down all the Soviet ties. Okay, I do understand that Africa has got Soviet ties because of its war of liberation. However, they were good in the past, but will not serve any good for us now. For us to have a rapid development, rapid infrastructure programs that will really transform our communities, bringing water to our communities, electrifying Africa, reindustrializing Africa. Okay, not the but beginning to industrialize Africa in a much robust and pain-free, okay, and pain-free way, is for us to be in agreement with Washington, not to be in loggerheads with Washington, always trying to fight Washington. You see, when you fight Washington, especially taking the side of rogue nations like Russia, when the wrath of the American empire comes against Putin in Russia and in surrounding areas, it will in no way not stop there, but will also come to Africa. So African countries, you need to prepare yourself for a war. Okay, if you do not want to have a war, if you want peace, therefore follow my lead. Follow what I'm saying. I'm saying, therefore, we start in Zimbabwe, in stabilizing Zimbabwe and making it a partner that is going to lead us into this free world. Hallelujah. So the sources of income can come from the global financial markets, from multilateral agencies, from the United Nations agencies, and any other international consensus for the development of Zimbabwe that can be imagined during that time. And also the Chinese development bank as well. You don't want to remove to leave the China out. As I told you, that China is a good partner for it is called good financial institutions and technological institutions and stuff like that. But China is very weak when it comes to rule of law. China is very weak when it comes to the promotion of democracy, respect for human rights. China is very weak militarily. So you cannot have a full-on relationship with China. But we do have some level of relationship with China that we're seeking. So therefore, in this plan that I have, we will need to have the U.S. Army, okay, the U.S. Army capabilities to recapacitate the Zimbabwe National Army so that it will be able to be a powerful force to be reckoned with, to work throughout from Mozambique to DRC to South Sudan to Niger to Burkina Faso, Central African region, CAR to Sierra Leone and Mali, basically the rest of Africa, so that we'll be able to contain this Russian aggression against the free world, all right, and the Commonwealth as well. And I say that the reason why the US must step into Africa is because we've seen France leaving the Sahel region and creating that that space that has allowed Russia to take over. And you know that Russia is a bad player in the region already. The Russian militants that are playing in the region are already raping people, killing people, causing internal conflicts, and just taking the people's resources for cents on the dollar. So I will need also Russia to understand that I mean Washington to understand that there's a difference between Russia and China. Okay, so as I said earlier on, that Russia is a problem. It's going to be a problem to Africa. China is merely a competitive country. Okay, so I don't have a problem with China versus Russia competition. It's a competition for economic dominance, to understand. So Washington is right to fight its own economic war against China, and China also wants to dominate economically. That's, as far as I see, that's where it is all about. That's where it ends. I do not see a full-on war. I mean, at the moment, I do not envision one. Neither do I think one is necessary. But we do really need to take an aggressive effort against, what you call it, against Russia.